So you can see here our heat map that is probably familiar to very many of you that shows this concentration of food insecurity in our county, and some data that's a little on the old side, but we could spend hours talking about how to quantify food insecurity. This kind of gives you a little bit of a perspective of where we are. I think these numbers sort of undersell where we are in terms of food insecurity in the county. We know, for instance, that with children, it is more likely closer to about 14% of our children who are experiencing some kind of food insecurity. And honestly, this could all have been made much worse during COVID, but for a lot of the federal support we received through ARPA funds to allow local governments to procure food sources, and also through these emergency allotments, which really were a huge boost to those individuals who were receiving SNAP. And just so we're all clear on what these emergency allotments are, this meant that during COVID, any individual who was eligible for SNAP was receiving the maximum benefit allowed. So just this slide here, that number is the amount that the federal government has decided is the minimum dollar amount for an individual needed to eat a healthy diet for a month. And you can see how that translates in Montgomery County. We have snapshot data here from December 2022. It's the last month where we have data that shows this sort of population breakdown, but you can see that means that 64, closer now 65, maybe more, 1,000 individuals in Montgomery County are receiving SNAP, almost 28,000 children. That average benefit amount you can see is $279 amount for an individual, and that increases with the number of people in your household. And something that surprises a lot of people, I think, is the amount of infusion of money from the federal government into our local economy because of our SNAP recipients receiving that $18 million to feed themselves. And we're here because of this benefit cliff. You've heard about it in the news. I think whenever we hear about SNAP in the news, it's never good news. And what has happened is that emergency allotment has gone away as of March of this year. We don't have the data for that yet. We're still sort of seeing what that looks like. But what it means in reality is that that maximum benefit is still there for individuals who do not earn income. But for everyone else, their benefit is calculated based on what they earn and their household expenses. FRAC estimates that the average loss is about $82 a person. But anecdotally, we see and talk to so many people who have gone from that $280 a month, or some even more, $345 a month, down to this $23, and it's been crushing. People are panicked. They don't know how they're going to feed themselves, and they are searching out any possible resource to help them out. And I think the big question on everyone's mind, and something frankly that we are struggling with, is what can we do? If you want to dive into the intricacies of SNAP, the thing that we are trying to do for our own clients is really educate them on how to maximize their individual benefits. Because benefits are now calculated based on household expenses and income, we're making sure that they know how to report all of that information. But I think what people don't often fully appreciate is just the time tax, the pressure that it takes for people to sustain their federal benefits. It takes a lot of effort to comply with all of those requirements. And so we as an outreach organization are trying to help them along. Other things we have to do is mobilize a referral network in our community to connect residents to other resources. We have a tight community and we have fantastic partners, and you're going to hear from some of them tonight. But making sure we can do those soft pass-offs so that people who are just struggling and panic know that they have someone or somewhere they can get help. And the final thing is really making it easier for people to access benefits, helping people on SNAP to access other kinds of benefits. And I know that our panelists tonight are going to be speaking to that and some really interesting and exciting things happening at the county government level. So I will stop talking now, but I just wanted to really let you know that people are just struggling and panicked, and we are, trying to do everything we can for them. And I'm excited to hear about the other things that are happening for these folks. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Mike Grant, who is one of our favorite trusted partners. Excuse me, I'm trying to stop if it's my screen sharing at Interfaith Works. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Hi, how is everyone doing? I'm Mike Grant. I'm the program manager at the Interfaith Works Food Pantry. Some of you may know us from the lines of people coming out to pick out food for the first 2 years of the pandemic, and now luckily we've changed over to the choice pantry model. I see a couple of my volunteers here, so thank you for showing up after hours as well. I'm going to be sharing some of the same statistics, but now I don't have to carry a 50-pound bag of potatoes while doing it with you guys. So as we're seeing right now is we started out with about 500 families coming to us each week when we started last July with the Choice Pantry, and that has quickly grown to about 600 plus families every week. With the newcomers coming in the county, it is extremely stressful for them. Many are coming to us with absolutely nothing. They are getting their passports taken from them at the border, and then they are put on a bus and coming straight to us. A lot of them are fortunate enough to come in Montgomery County based on the experience they're in. But with those 600 families, we're fortunate enough to have ramped up the food. So we're giving about 25,000 pounds of food every week. And now that we've switched to the pantry model, it's no longer, hey, it's nice to see you. Here's a bag of food. We'll see you next week. It's, hey, how are you? What are the needs you guys need? And now you can go pick out your own items. Now, we were supposed to supplement a small portion of the food. I believe is supposed to be 25% at the beginning. And now we are the main source of food. So what I've done is my own grocery shopping to the closest grocery store to us, which is the Giant around the street. And if a family of 4 went to that Giant, went and gained the same items they got from us, it would cost them over $140. And now that doesn't include all of the meat and produce that we were actually able to get for free for them, but that's what it would cost them alone just to go there. And that is up over 30% just from last year based off the Department of Commerce. So luckily for us, through Elizabeth, through our partners, DC Capital Area Food Bank, we are able to get actually some of our items for free and as low as 15% on the 15 cents on the dollar. Now, I do have to point out for Elizabeth that SNAP was huge for us. It was a focal point of all of the hubs. Please sign up as many families as you can for SNAP. I believe it was for every dollar spent on SNAP, $1.50, $1.60 would come back in the economy. It was huge, the amount of doors it would open for those families. So unfortunately, now that it's gotten cut, I had a couple who came in who say, hey, we used to get over $100 a month. Now I get $15. What am I supposed to buy with that as the grocery store? So that's another thing that we are tackling with these families. It is a huge problem, but we are getting 20 to 30 new families, whether they're newcomers or they've been in the county and they're at their last straw and they're reaching out for help. There's still a ton of infrastructure that needs, it feels like we've been doing this food distribution forever, but it's really only been 2 years for us. I believe Marco was the first hub that's on this call and has been around for 3 years. So we are looking into cold storage. Every single food distribution place in the country, I believe, has that issue. So that is definitely one of the bigger things that we are tackling. So fortunately enough, when they walk through our doors, they are able to access multiple programs. Montgomery County has a ton to offer, but the biggest, one of the biggest problems is where to start. They either don't know where to go or obviously who to trust. So luckily, most of the time when someone comes to us, it's because their neighbor told us about them. So when they're coming into us, the first thing we do is we'll get them food. And then they go, hey, look down the hallway. You guys need to get some clothes. How's the rent? How are the kids? How's everyone doing? Is the electric bill okay? Oh, are you looking for a job? So that's something that all of the hubs are moving to, having multiple resources at their station right there. So, that's just a huge thing. Unfortunately, Montgomery County has a ton of operations and a ton of resources. So it's great for there. Like I said, we are just getting started. We're only 2 to 3 years. Interfaith Works has been around for 50 years. And look at all the problems we're still tackling today. So fortunate enough that we have a lot of people on this call that I recognize that have been able to provide a huge amount of help. With that, I will pass it over to Delegate Charkoudian.
Great. Thank you. And what an honor to be with everybody today. And I'm just going to share my screen here. Whoops, does that work for everyone? Can you see the screen? It is good to see everybody. And greetings from Annapolis, where we are in our we've got 10 days left of the legislative session. And I say that because we are scrambling to continue to get all this good stuff over the finish line. I'll give you an update on each of these things in just a moment. But also by way of a, by way of apology for the fact that I'm going to have to scoot out at 7:30. And so I'm sorry I can't be here for the whole time. I'm looking at this panel that I'm here with, and so many of the volunteers and activists who are on this call. And I'm just honored to be with all of you and so grateful for all the work you've done for so many years, especially during the pandemic, but on an ongoing basis, recognizing food insecurity in our community and all that we need to do, both in the immediate term, short term, and medium term and long term. And so I'm just going to highlight a couple of things that we have as legislation addressing some of these issues. The first thing I want to talk about is the Maryland Food System Resiliency Council. And so we started hearing from the Montgomery County Food Council, which is, I have to say, the strongest and one of the best in probably the nation. I was going to say Maryland, but probably the nation. And really modeling what a food council, with all of the ways that it breaks down the silos of all of the aspects of food and food security, how that approach really can make sure that we are building sustainable food systems while we're meeting the immediate needs. We're also building systems that really are sustainable, both in terms of for human dignity, for human need, for the environment, for the economy, and for long-term resiliency. And so the way that the Montgomery County Council has been able to do that for the Montgomery County, been able to do that for the county. 2 years ago, in the middle of the pandemic, we were looking for the same kind of thing at the state level, when many of us were scrambling to figure out how to really address these issues at the state level. And there wasn't one. And so we put in emergency legislation initially 2 years ago to create the Food System Resiliency Council as a temporary council. And we put it in MDEM, which is the Maryland Department of Emergency Management, because at the time it was very much in the emergency side of things. But it again was designed to break down the silos between agriculture and commerce and food security within Department of Human Services and emergency preparedness. And so it's done some really good work, identified, connected people across the state, identified policies that need changing, which we have subsequently changed. Some of them you're looking at here on the screen, identified funding sources, supported the state to go after some of those funding sources, and continues to advocate for things like actually cold storage for food rescue and distribution. And so this council this year, this HB 32, which has now passed the House and the Senate, this will make the council permanent for the state, recognizing the need to do this on a long-term basis and to continue these efforts. And so hopeful that looks like it's on its way to passage. And if folks are interested in more information about the council, we can share with you ways to get involved. The next two that I want to talk about actually tie back to the comments that Elizabeth made about the time tax to sustain the federal benefits. And I think this is a really important thing. And any of you who are working with folks, or if you yourself are engaged in accessing these benefits, it is an extraordinary amount of time to get. And then, as Mike said, sometimes $15 a month. And the thing is that in addition to to SNAP, often people are also struggling to get their healthcare, and they're struggling to pay their utility bills, and they're struggling to pay their rent. And in the case of utility bills and Medicaid, the qualifications and the application are nearly identical. And yet we have a system that has people applying 3 different times, right? So you do all that paperwork for SNAP, all that uploading of things, all the documentation, get kicked out, booted out of the system, restart your computer, your phone, if you don't have a computer, mail the documents in. And then you got to do the same thing for energy assistance. And then you got to do the same thing for Medicaid. And so as these annual cycles happen, often people get dropped off of one or more of these various benefits. And so these 2 bills will basically automatically enroll people in SNAP into energy assistance, and automatically enroll people in SNAP into Medicaid. And so it'll streamline access to these other really crucial services and essentially set up a system so people are only really going through that application process one time. And the reason we picked SNAP as the entry point is because there is more of a focus on more people have SNAP than Medicaid and energy assistance, and there's more assistance out there to access SNAP. And so the idea was, if we take the thing where we have the strongest entry point and we add the others to it, then that would be the way to maximize efficiency for both people who are accessing the service and, as it turns out, for state government as well. The next thing that I want to highlight is HB 502 SB 2. So in addition to this issue of the cliff that we've been talking about, you probably have also heard about the theft on people's electronic benefits that was happening over the fall of last year into the winter. And because of the structures that are in place, the theft that was happening on people's benefits, there was no system in place to put those funds back in. So people who had several $100s in their SNAP cards, suddenly it disappeared, and there was no mechanism to get that money back on. So I'm happy to report that this bill has passed the House and it's in the Senate, and so and the Senate's into the House, and so it's just really a technical issue of getting this bill back over to the other side. And we expect that this bill will pass, and we'll have a system in place that will use state money. We'll use state money to replenish people's. The state has accessed federal money to replace the benefits, and Maryland, I think, is the first state to put this into place. The next two that I want to highlight are not directly related to SNAP and the cliff, but also related to issues of food security, both of which are moving through the House and the Senate. And one is the Maryland Meals for Achievement breakfast program. And I see a lot of folks on here who I know have been doing advocacy on this, and we thank you for that. This increases the access to automatically providing breakfast in the classroom in schools with, I believe it's 40% farms rates. But as everyone I think here probably knows, when food meals, lunch or breakfast is automatically provided, it massively increases the amount of food that gets to the people who are most food insecure. And so this bill will expand that program. And finally, the Hunger Free Campus Grant Program. This is a grant program that was developed a few years ago to provide funds to institutions to address food insecurity on campus. And this bill, SB 353, will expand the funding for that program. So hopefully address the on-campus food insecurity issues. And that has passed the Senate. It didn't have a cross-file, but it is in the House now, and we are cautiously optimistic that will move along all the way through. I will send this slide to Interfaith Works, and they can get it out to everyone who's on this call, and the links will allow you also to continue to track the progress of these. If folks are interested in more information on this, I'm going to put my email address into the chat. I'm so grateful to have had a chance to be with you all today, and happy to pass the baton to Council Member Gabe Albernas.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much, Delegate Charkoudian, and thank you for your continued leadership in Annapolis. I can just tell you in the first person how dedicated Delegate Charkoudian is to all things, especially in our social safety net, and she's been a tremendous partner to the council, and I just want to thank her for her continued leadership. And it is an honor and privilege to be with all of you this evening. I have a great deal of respect for IW, and I see a lot of familiar faces in this Zoom. And I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's important to make sure the choir sings well and together. So, and I want to thank you all for your continued leadership. So by way of background, I'm going to talk about an important initiative that we embarked upon last year that was built on an incredible foundation of work that's now been done for over 20 years here in Montgomery County. So as all of you know on this call, we experienced what none of us could have anticipated prior to the pandemic, which was a crisis unlike anything we'd ever seen here in Montgomery County, with obviously lines stretching in some cases over a mile long, and just devastating images of families in crisis trying to access the most basic of food and other supports that in many instances families had never had to access before. But several things emerged through the pandemic that were extraordinary. One, we already had a really strong infrastructure of nonprofit organizations, community leaders, and government programs and services addressing the food security issue in a strategic way. I had had the opportunity to meet with the Food Council prior to the pandemic when I became chair of the Health and Human Services Committee in the county, and was immediately struck by the wonderful coordination and the support that each of those organizations were providing to each other, the sharing of data, the leveraging of resources, the identification of different funding sources. It was truly an extraordinary group. And so it was serendipitous that that group was already in place when the pandemic hit. And as we saw through the pandemic, many new organizations and faith-based organizations entered into the food security space that really expanded the social safety net of the county in a way that was mostly organic, but that I am convinced saved lives and provided a bridge and a lifeline in a way that there's no way the county government could have done on its own. But what also emerged through the pandemic was this massive coordinated effort to reach communities that in some cases we had never quite reached before. And in a few moments, you'll hear from my good friend Marco Rivera Oven to talk about the outstanding work that was done in Germantown. But I was at an event sort of on the latter part of the pandemic, and this gentleman made a comment, and he said something to the effect of, there's no reason why we can't end hunger here in Montgomery County. And I thought about it, and he's right. We have this, in addition to amazing infrastructure of organizations, we have political will. We have one of the wealthiest counties in the country. We have a dedicated private sector, and we have a lot of people who want to help. But what we needed was coordinated efforts and a strategic effort that laid to bear a strategy that could take us to ending childhood hunger in Montgomery County. And so I was fortunate enough to be elected by my colleagues to be council president last year. And it's only a one-year term. And so you don't get a lot of chances to make the kind of impact that you'd like to make. But each council president has a tradition of choosing an issue that they want to focus on. And the issue that I chose was ending childhood hunger. And so with the support of my colleagues in the county executive, we issued a resolution and identified funding to underwrite the cost of a blue ribbon panel made up largely of a lot of people on this call, people that were already members of the Food Council, but also expanded into other community-based organizations and community leaders working with government. For 6 months, this group took their job, as you would expect, extraordinarily seriously. They conducted a series of surveys. They did some both quantitative and qualitative analysis. They looked at data that was developed both prior and during the pandemic. And what they found was truly extraordinary. And it led to a series of recommendations that was presented to the council just a few weeks ago. That effort initiated the development of the Office of Food Resiliency, which is a cabinet level position reporting to the county executive. And our good friend on this call, Heather Breskin, has assumed that role and will continue the coordination that was done through the pandemic and the sharing of data and the more strategic support for the nonprofit and community-based organizations that are on the ground. In addition to that, we looked at the data, and what we found, and none of this will come as a surprise to any of you, but there are approximately 30,000 children in Montgomery County that right now aren't sure where their next meal is going to come from. We found that over half of children in poverty speak language other than English at home. Food insecurity is significantly more common in Black and Hispanic and Latino households. And almost a third of the children facing food insecurity are younger than school age. And so meals in schools are a critical resource and part of the solution, but for more than a third of children, they don't have access to that support. What they also found in their surveys was that, and again, none of this will come as a surprise, but it was quantitated, transportation is a major limiting factor in parents getting help. Not knowing where or how to ask for help is a major gap. The benefit application process, and Delegate Tarkoudian alluded to this earlier, is incredibly challenging to navigate, often duplicative, and difficult, especially for somebody that speaks English as a second language, to be able to access. We also found through this survey that food security must include nutritional security, which was also something that was clearly reported through the surveys. And what came out of this incredible group of individuals was a series of strategies, a lot of which are within the county's control, some of which, however, is not and will require strong partnerships with our federal government. I want to highlight Congressman Raskin, who has been doing extraordinary work at the national level in a bipartisan fashion to look at how we can expand SNAP benefits, to look at how we can expand universal meals, and other key strategies that will be part of the overarching solution. But I want to uplift a few of the strategies that were recommended that I found really interesting and innovative. And one is the notion that food is medicine. So partnering with our pediatricians to literally prescribe nutritional food and to provide vouchers to those pediatricians to be able to either access services among our incredible nonprofit organizations such as MANA or the Capital Area Food Bank, or many of the other incredible providers that are working in this space, or provide vouchers to go to our local grocery stores. Some of the other important components are a strong partnership and alliance with our school system. I visited recently the 7th food pantry through MCPS in our Title I schools that was open just a few months ago. And I was struck by how culturally humble the food that was offered to that community was. And I had the opportunity to speak to a number of parents who got emotional when talking about this unique and new opportunity for them and their communities. These food pantries are open on the weekends, they're open evenings, they're staffed by volunteers as well as other PTA members and other folks in the community. But it was an extraordinary effort that I think is going to make a big difference. The last two things I'll uplift, because I could talk about this all night, but I promise I won't, is the issue of data sharing. We have a lot of organizations who are doing extraordinary work, but they are flying blind. And as we know in this space, there are often families who, and if I were in the same situation, I would do the same thing, are navigating on their own and identifying resources that are available, but we are not sharing information in a way that's helpful to the organizations or incredible people on the ground that could ultimately help families and eliminate the issues that are leading to food insecurity in the first place. Which leads me to another big initiative that we are halfway through its pilot program is a guaranteed income pilot here in Montgomery County, which is offering $800 a month to 300 households. That is a partnership with the Department of Health and Human Services, as well as the Collaboration Council and several other organizations. They are conducting extensive surveys on an analysis of that particular initiative, but it's tied to what we're talking about right now, because we have to get at the root cause of food insecurity if we truly are going to be able to credibly say that we have eliminated childhood hunger here in Montgomery County. But I think with the steps that we have laid out in the plan that was presented to the council 2 weeks ago, the continued political will and emphasis on this, and the openness to partnerships and work with our federal partners, I am totally convinced that we can get there. And not just get there and say we've won, but truly something that's sustainable, because this is a core issue to academic achievement. It's a core issue to social and emotional learning, and it's something we have to get right, but we're not going to be able to do it on our own. So I'm thrilled to be working with all of you and look forward to more work, and hopefully a year from now, we'll be able to report out where we are. And I'm sure it's going to be in an even better place than we are now. So I will now turn it over to another outstanding young leader here in Montgomery County, Marco Rivera Oven, who has founded, along with his family, the Up County Hub. So with that, Marco, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Councilmember Albrignos. And just thank you for everything that you do at the county level and being such a champion on food insecurity and all the support that you've given us and all the other hubs. So thank you, Gabe. Good evening, everybody. My name is Marco Rivera Oven. I am the Director of Operations for the Up County Hub. We are located in Germantown, Maryland. We are a nonprofit as of July 1st. Very exciting. So brand new nonprofit. Yes, I saw Courtney. I know how hard it is to get a nonprofit started. So this was founded, as Gabe said, by my family in March of 2020. This was strictly, to feed families in Germantown in the Up County, because we saw that there was a need, specifically where we were from in Germantown, that there wasn't an organization addressing the need in Germantown. Up County has always been kind of a desert for county resources, and we really wanted to help fill that need. The Up County hub really grew drastically with, as some other people said, with those lines, during the pandemic that I saw firsthand, running all over the county to try and get food, partnering with all these different organizations. Everybody was doing the same thing, but we were all doing it as a collective group. As we were coming out of 2021, that's when structure started to happen. That's when the council started looking at the model and they started supporting it. That's when Interfaith Works came in and created the pantry. That's when other hubs started going throughout the county. That's when Elizabeth and now Heather, who's at the Food Resilience, started looking at us and partnering and doing more SNAP outreach. And it was working great. But now I feel like I'm back in the pandemic. My shelves are empty. I'm hurting for all these people that are now coming back 2 years later, that were actually donating to the hub, are now coming back and asking even if we can give them more food. We are at a place now where, as Councilmember Albany just said, Montgomery County, we can make this happen if we all work together. I mean, his motto is he's trying to end childhood hunger, and I believe we can do that. The hub has always been a holistic approach, no questions asked. We try and ask the bare necessities, because there are a lot of these people that we are serving that are, as Mike said, who's my counterpart in Rockville, a lot of newcomers, a lot of people that don't speak English. They're just really trying to feed their families. A lot of people that are working during the days, their kids go to school and they just need that food because their priorities are keeping a roof over their heads, paying for transportation if they can even afford a vehicle. So the thing that they need assistance is where we come in, which is that food. We are feeding almost 1,600 families a week right now. In Germantown, Montgomery Village, Clarksburg. We now are slithering into parts of Gaithersburg. And I know that's everywhere. I know Wheaton, Silver Spring, I know that's the whole county right now. And Mike, as he just said, everywhere, people are going where they need food. And it's, eggs are expensive. As Elizabeth said, people were put on that relief, they got taken off, but prices are almost twice as high now. And that's why people are looking at model, organizations like me, like Mike and other people. So I'm really glad that this conversation is happening. I appreciate everybody being here. Food insecurity is very close and dear to my heart. The hub, at least in Germantown, we are now a permanent organization, so we will be here for the residents in Up County, and I'm very happy for that. We're located in a county building at the Up County Regional Service Center. And that was in thanks to support from the county government, as well as the regional service director, to kind of have that holistic approach where, if somebody really needs that need, such as SNAP, I do have a full-time case manager that works in partnership with the Montgomery County Food Council. We do as much outreach as we can, because SNAP is important. We do need those families to sign up for that. We will not be doing what we are doing forever at the capacity that we can do it. And I think, families are starting to realize that, money doesn't grow on trees. We are one of the wealthiest counties, but we can't, I can't be doing 2,000 families a week. That's just and these families need to understand, they need to understand what SNAP is. They need to understand how to apply for it. Our case manager is doing everything we can about, just so where we serve, about 80% of our clientele speak Spanish, or are immigrants or are newcomers. So as Gabe said, the Latino community is being very impacted, at least in the Up County and other areas in the county. So as a young Latino man that helps run this organization, seeing people like me that are struggling, really it hits close and dear to my heart, and we're doing everything that we can with our hub. I know Mike has been a champion in Rockville, with these other hubs throughout the county that we're doing. I had a wonderful conversation today with Manna Food Center and their nutrition partner, because we are trying to teach these families doing everything that they can, to understand the whole SNAP outreach. So I won't ramble on, but that's what we're doing. So I really appreciate everybody for being here. It's a very important conversation, and I will now pass it off to Michael Wilson from Maryland Hunger Solutions, who I've had the pleasure of being on multiple Zoom calls throughout the pandemic, and I will let him go. So Michael, I'll pass it off to you. Good to see you.
Good to see you, and thanks for the introduction. I want to first thank everybody here for your work, whatever you're doing. Even you're just participating in this conversation, you're helping to move things forward. And I also want to especially recognize Delegate Charkoudian, and I know she's not here, but I will tell you that there is nobody in the state legislature who is more focused on food insecurity than Delegate Charkoudian. She is a champion. And everybody who's spoken already has literally said everything that needed to be said, but not everything. And so because people were so thoughtful and so hopeful, let me offer you some of the things that are hopeful, because we're facing really challenging times. And I begin by saying that the difference, I have some numbers for you. The difference between the pandemic SNAP benefits that we got and the non-pandemic SNAP benefits is a big number. It is $1 billion. Maryland will get $1 billion less over the course of the year because of the not continuing the emergency allotments. And that's a really big number, and it's really hard, and it's hard not just for low-income participants. I want to be clear. It's going to be hard for grocery stores. It's going to be hard for farmers markets. It's going to be hard for distributors and eventually farmers. You can't take $1 billion out of our food system and not have it impact lots of people. And when people ask me, how do we solve this problem? So we don't solve this problem. We can ameliorate this problem. We can help, but there's nothing we can do that make up for that $1 billion. Yes, Elizabeth talked about having people maximize their benefits. Yes, you should do that. You can go back and calculate all your expenses. Folks who are eligible for WIC should use WIC, the Women's, Infants, and Children's Program, especially for moms and kids and infants and pregnant moms. Yes, we have to have our charitable sector help people, the Capillary Food Bank, Manna Food Center, Maryland Food Bank, all of them. But it doesn't make up for the $1 billion that we have lost. And so we've got to find other ways to address this. We cannot give up on the federal government. They are the big kahuna. They can make a difference if they choose to. We've got to talk to our state government. We have a supplemental benefit in Maryland. So no one who is 62 or over will get less than $40. It's not enough, but it's better than the minimum. And so we've got to figure out ways to help strengthen that and encourage the state to also play a role. I'm going to give you 3 more numbers, then I'm going to wrap up and stop because I really want to get to your questions. Before the pandemic, there were 593,000 people in Maryland on SNAP. At a time when people thought the economy was great, 593,000. At the height of the pandemic, we had more people on SNAP than at any time in recorded history in the state of Maryland, over 855,000 across the state. Now, as the pandemic seems to be receding, we are at 657,000. People continue to have challenges, and we can't ignore them or think about just the pandemic. We have a real challenge for the working poor, people who work every day and still are on SNAP. We have real challenges for lots of mixed status and immigrant households who have real challenges. We have a lot of challenges for kids and for seniors. And I like what Gabe Albernoz says, that we have to be thoughtful and we have to be strategic to address all of these things. And I think this conversation is part way we can be strategic and thoughtful. And I thank you for your invitation, and I'm going to be quiet.
Michael, you are a magician, sir. Thank you for bringing us home. We appreciate it. Thank you to each of our panelists for sharing your information from your perspective. It's been extremely helpful. I have one question, and then I'm going to open it up for any other questions. Again, if you have questions right now that are sort of percolating, please put them in the chat. There was a note about data sharing, which I think in some ways, and the importance of data sharing between nonprofits or within a food resiliency system. And perhaps joined to the, related to that is this idea that perhaps there are people who need help, like in Montgomery County from the food hubs, who don't know about what help exists. So for any of the panelists, if you'd like to take either or both of those questions on, what recommendations, briefly, would you have to increase data sharing, and to what end? And then also, what steps do you think we should be taking as a county to ensure that more people know about the food resources that do exist in the county?
So I'll just jump in really quick. I'll take the second one first. And we learned during the pandemic, and we all know this, but we sort of expect people to find us, but we have to double down and be especially aggressive in going out and meeting the community where they are. During the pandemic, we launched Por Nuestra Salud y Bienestar through the Latino Health Initiative, and it was an extraordinary success. And the reason it was a success was because we hired dozens of health promoters who went out to the supermercados, the soccer fields, the iglesias, everywhere they could in the community that were gathering places. And they presented information in a way that, it goes way beyond just having a flyer that's translated. You have to be able to communicate. You also have to meet the connectors, the trusted individuals that are embedded within communities that people turn to for information. And you also have to put some money into this. So right now, as we speak, I'm working with Council Member Fanny Gonzalez to do something that Montgomery County has, believe it or not done before, which is actually pay for media buys to disseminate information. We rely too much on PSAs, we rely too much on earned media, and it's not effective. And what we're seeing is there's been this new and emerging group of multi-ethnic communications organizations, oftentimes doing this as volunteers, who have tremendous followings on social media or through WhatsApp. And so we have to reach those folks and help make sure that they're put in a position to disseminate information as well. So those are just some of the ways that I think we're going to have to work on. And with regards to data sharing, now that we have this Office of Food Resilience, Heather and her soon-to-be hired team will have access to county government data through Health and Human Services, through the Department through DHCA, Housing and Community Affairs, and that information, obviously at a macro level, but will be able to be shared in a way that will be helpful, I think, to various organizations and create more of a one-stop shop than we've had before. But that information sharing is going to have to go both ways. And so as we build out the infrastructure for data sharings, we also have to provide you all, when I say you all, community-based organizations, the administrative infrastructure to be able to collect your own data. And I know that it's tough to find resources to be able to underwrite the costs because so much of the grant money goes to direct service and not enough to administrative support. But we know that's critical to meeting the demand and again, being strategic. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Courtney, or any of my other fellow panelists that might want to chime in.
So really quickly, Courtney, I think one of the things we learned at Maryland Hunger Solutions as a statewide organization was that prior to the pandemic, we would visit places like Montgomery County, Baltimore City, Prince George's County, and around the state. We always had a toll-free number, but since the pandemic, because people were in their homes, in their communities, not in public spaces, our toll-free number and the use of it exploded. And so we were getting calls, not by the dozen, but by the thousand. And if it wasn't for partners like Montgomery County Food Council and others who we could share resources and continue to help people from around the state, we would have been swamped and we could not have helped all those folks. So that's one of the things we've learned going forward, that having remote outreach is critical. And so I put our toll-free number in the chat. Feel free to call us. We help every people as much as we can, but we also share that work with the Montgomery County Food Council, with the Howard County Community Action Council, and with others to try to make sure that we can help people.
Great, thank you. I don't know if anyone else wants to take a stab at that, but I'll supplement my question with one that's in the chat, and maybe Councilmember Albanos, this comes back to you. About whether the strategies presented are supported by the new budget, or are there ways that the new budget is helping to reduce food insecurity? And I'm thinking that through the creation of the Office of Food Resiliency, so that's at that sort of coordination level, which has been mentioned before. And I'll say, just for everyone's information, from what I understand, there is an intent to continue funding the food hubs for fiscal year 24. At least that was in the county executive's recommended budget. And I'd imagine, based on the conversation today and from what I've heard, that will continue to be supported by the county council. But I'm not a council member, so I certainly can't speak for y'all. So go ahead, Gabe.
Thank you, Courtney. Well, I'm one of 11, so I can only speak for myself, but I can tell you that clearly we have to keep the momentum going, particularly with the food hubs and all of the other innovative approaches that were established during the pandemic. It's obviously challenging because a lot of what we were able to stand up was because of federal dollars that have expired. But we are fully committed to engaging in this work. And I know you all have heard similar comments from Governor Moore, but I'm immensely optimistic about the investments that the state will be making in this space as well. And they have signaled right off the bat that we are going to forge strong partnerships. Secretary Rafael Lopez, the new Secretary of Health for the state, visited Montgomery County yesterday, and he shared something with us that I unfortunately did not find shocking, but the previous administration had taken the strategic position to not apply for many federal funds, if you can believe it. And so there was a lot of money that was left on the table. Well, fortunately, that has dramatically changed. And there is an aggressive effort right now to partner with the Biden administration to see what more we may be able to unlock here. But the last thing I'll say for now on the budget is the county executive released his recommended budget on March 15th. It's now before the council. We've begun the process of digging into it. It's over $6.5 billion. But there have been significant investments made in our social safety net and in food security that we will certainly continue and see what more we can add to if possible.
Great, thank you, Gabe. Another question, and again, if you have questions, put them in the chat. We want this to be a community conversation, but I don't have a problem. Or raise your hand if you have a question. I don't have a problem asking some questions. So this is perhaps more to the maybe to the nonprofit providers, but to anyone really. In what ways do you think we can sort of remind the public that this is still a very real issue, right? And this is something I've seen from my position, that there's, I don't know if I want to call it pandemic fatigue, but there's a sense that there was a whole lot of interest and people could see the lines and it was very real. It was in front of your face. There were many churches and nonprofit organizations that were stepping up into the food security space. We're not involved in it before. It was everywhere. You couldn't miss it. And I'm not suggesting that work is no longer happening, but it doesn't seem to be as public. And as a result, it does appear that there's decreased public interest. And so I'm wondering, again, for any of our panelists, if you have any thoughts about how we might continue to ensure that this remains at the forefront of people's minds. The pandemic may be over, but the hunger cliff is very real.
I can speak to some activities at the Food Council that might be responsive to this. You know, one of the things that we have started doing is holding a monthly advocacy call for community members and organizations as well to really continue the engagement on the advocacy front. And so I will put additional information in the chat about that and invite all of you to attend this call where we do engage with elected officials, as well as do training and talk about what's going on the policy side. And I think that's a way of getting individual members of our community energized and educated about this continuing need.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Marco,
Yeah.
Michael Wilson, anyone want to speak to that, please?
So I'll say something really quickly. And I talked about the numbers before, about the more than 500,000 people on SNAP before and more than 600,000 now. There are a lot of people who just want to go back. They just want to go back to where it was. There's no going back. And for some of us, going back wasn't good either. And so we've got to find a way forward. We've got to find a way forward so we're bringing all of us along and not just think about going back. I mean, I just think that language is so important. We want to go forward and not go back.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just be brief, Courtney. I think what Michael and Elizabeth, you know, that food security call is extremely beneficial for advocacy, for people to understand, you know, what's going on in the community. But, you know, Michael really touched on it, you know, like, you know, the pandemic was almost 3 years ago, but there's still a need. There's still a need in Montgomery County. Food insecurity is still a huge issue. So calls like these are very beneficial to explain to the public, to have calls like this with, you know, Council Member Albernios and Elizabeth from the Food Council, just to explain that this issue is still here and that, you know, there are people working together as a whole to try and resolve this.
I think, you know, putting a personal touch on this can help as well. You know, a lot of people will post stats online and, you know, hear the issues, but it won't resonate with everyone until they see it. So I have a couple volunteers, and Agnes, one of our board members, I'll use you as an example, where Agnes brings in a group of her friends every month to us. And now I believe it's 2 groups, and those groups have grown every time. So you know, I'll talk to the new volunteers when they come in, and, you know, they were like, yeah, well, Agnes was telling me about, you know, the clothing that they're going through and the people they're seeing their help. Now we're dropping off food at our doorstep so they can bring it in. And I want to see where the stuff goes myself. And then that starts off the chain reaction. So they're all of a sudden, that person is now getting 2 more people coming in to volunteer. So you know, I think people can be a little bit burnt out of seeing the billion things they do on their screen every day. I know I scroll through a lot of things that just don't always resonate with me, and maybe I'm not really conscious of what I'm looking at. But, you know, every time I have a volunteer come in, you know, it's amazing what they do. And then a month later, they're bringing someone else with them, and they go, oh yeah, you know, Ed's been here with me volunteering every week, and I want to go in, and this place is amazing. You know, I had a vision of what it is, and I can't believe actually how big a problem it is, you know, now that I get to see it with my own eyes.
That's a great point, both Marco and Mike, right? Like, it's really important that people understand that this is still happening, and often you can sort of accomplish that goal by going on site to where the work is happening. Let me just take a moment of personal privilege to announce that at Interfaith Works, we are going to partner with the county to host a faith community volunteer fair. So this is a save the date for now. If you're on our mailing list, you will get it via email in the next week or 2. But let me just for now ask you to save the date for May the 6th. That's on a Saturday. We will have a faith community volunteer day. And please don't let that sort of indicate that you have to be affiliated with the faith community to attend. That is not the case, but this is a special sort of outreach that we're doing because we want people who are connected with faith communities to know how they can serve. And so there will be opportunities. Clearly, Interfaith Works will have opportunities, but also the county's volunteer center will have opportunities available, and many other nonprofits, some that have been mentioned today, will have sort of tables and be able to tell people who are coming through about how they can volunteer and become involved. And I think that is that's a really good example of what Mike just said, and also what Marco said, that it's important that people see and understand how it is that they can become involved. Okay, doing a time check here. It is 7:58, which is really good. I'm feeling good about the time. We have time for one more question if there's one out there. No? Okay. Any of our panelists, any last words before we wrap up? Okay. Well, I would like to thank each of you for being present tonight. This is an extremely important conversation. I realize that we had lots of information sort of together and thrown at you, but you all were all champs. We appreciate it. And the one thing I'd encourage you to do is, as you can, speak to people in your community, people in your circle, and remind them that while they may not see on the news people lined up around the block waiting for food, we know that the issue around hunger insecurity in Montgomery County, one of the wealthiest in the state and in the nation, that issue of food insecurity remains very real and has worsened for people who are now really at the precipice of hunger because the SNAP benefits that they were once able to rely on are gone. And as Michael J. Wilson mentioned, really, we can't make up that $1 billion. So thank you very much to everyone. Let me also ask you to interact with our social media. I'm going to share my screen just for the last 30 seconds or so that you can see all of our social media here. Please do interact with us. And we will, for each of the speakers, we'll be sure to tag you as we post about this event here tonight. So thanks so much to everyone. And we hope that you have a great evening and continue to spread the word. Take good care.